Now, the four horsemen of the apocalypse, war, death, pestilence, and famine, are working together for the demise of humanity. The image illustrates in many ways the obvious connection between health and armed conflict. The purpose of this talk is to consider how we should improve our understanding of health and armed conflict, given what I understand about the state of affairs. Like many human pursuits, this has an aspect of foolishness. There's only one obvious policy recommendation that doesn't really require much research here: stop armed conflict. Now, stopping armed conflict has proved rather difficult. And that leaves us with a crucial question of how to deal with what is second best, ameliorating the consequences, and preparing for rebuilding when the war stops. This requires understanding. First, how does the four horsemen work together? How do pestilence, famine, and death interact with war? Second, how can working to stop one of the horsemen in his track help hinder the others? Can struggling against disease and famine build peace? Are health workers in a privileged position to do so? To some extent, this talk is about those topics, but it's actually going to be more about how we talk about them. The whole field of conflict demography, conflict epidemiology, has been embroiled in a series of conflicts between the researchers, and some of the contestants are here today. Child mortality in Iraq, post-invasion mortality in Iraq, the tragedies of Darfur and the Democratic Republic of the Congo are perhaps the most important. The three first controversies are basically controversies about surveys and survey quality. Survey design and survey quality are important topics. Mortality surveys are difficult to carry out, and we seem to have considerable ways to go before they can be considered reliable. Or that we may agree that a specific survey is reliable or not. At the moment, the DR Congo estimates are perhaps the most interesting, because they so well illustrate the force of different narratives in the field of conflict and health. There are, or was, three such positions: the IRC, International Rescue Committee position, the Lambert and L'État position, and the conventional position. 2 days ago, a new position was added, namely that of the Human Security Report. The IRC position, namely that mortality jumped up at the start of the war in 1998, and that it has been at high levels ever since, leading to an excess mortality of roughly 5.5 million by 2007, and on their website now 5.4 million up to now. The basis for this estimate is a succession of mortality surveys of increasing scope and also increasing quality. Then there is the so-called LLT position after the two Belgian demographers Lambert and L'État. It does, in contrast to what most people believe, also hold that the mortality in DRC is very high. But they portray the trend in mortality as a gradual increase, which is concomitant with deteriorating conditions in DRC from the 70s. In their view, the mortality resulting from the war is about 200,000. Quite a difference. The LLT estimate is arrived at by simulating the demographic development of DRC so that the 2006 voters registration is consistent with previous censuses and surveys. It's important to stress that the death rates arrived by the IRC and LLT are rather more similar than those of other sources. It is the interpretation of the rates into excess deaths that is really the issue. IRC holds that it was war, LLT generally bad living conditions. Thirdly, there is what I would call the received wisdom, namely that DRC is in fact trundling along with other African countries with a slowly declining or stable mortality levels. Could I get the next one here? Yeah. Okay, here you can see the different estimates of the demographic Republic of Congo as life expectancies. The red ones, the male ones, and the blue one, the female ones. Now, the conventional position, as illustrated by World Population Prospects 2004 and 2006, 2008 one is slightly higher, is a story about partly first increase in life expectancies and then a decline. The Lambert and Lollet-Tar is mostly the same, while the U.S. Census Bureau give a lot of credence to the first IRC surveys in showing a sharp drop about the beginning of the war, and then disregards the following IRC surveys for some reason. Now, as a story about a consensus story about the demographic development of a country, this is a rather bad example. There is no consensus, even in the more standard UN versions. Now, the 1995 and 2001 multiple indicator cluster surveys indicate stable under 5 mortality and at around 200 per 1,000 live births in the period 1985 to 1995, while the 2007 DHS survey indicate a decline to around 150 per 1,000 by 2005. This is around half of the IRC rate, although it's rather difficult to actually figure out the IRC rate in standard demographic terms. And it's also about 2/3 of what the Belgian demographers come to. It's not strange on this background that many doubt the quality of the DHS data. Well, this is basically the different estimates of child mortality with a trend line that shows what one could estimate as a trend from all of them. As you can see, basically a story about possibly a decline.